Hello everybody and Assalamu Alaikum. This is Arifa from Toronto. I'm very blessed to have two wonderful doctors with me. They were professionals, have done great things, and one thing before I introduce them, we the human beings sometimes don't thank God for what we have. For example, having teeth, having eyesight, having all the five senses what I have. Sometimes we forget to say thanks to the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same way I would say that I am blessed to have these two wonderful doctors with me. They are researchers. I request, listen to this show and share it with your friends and family. That can be a blessing for them, because these days there are a few sicknesses which are very common, and when I talk about diabetes, it is called as mother of all sicknesses. But we are lucky enough to have Dr. Anthony Leeds, who brought in the subject diabetes remission. Today I have Dr. Anthony Leeds with me. Dr. Anthony Leeds, I thank you for being with us and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I have another wonderful person, and of course that is Dr. Roy Taylor from the University of Newcastle, Northern England. Now, Dr. Taylor, Roy Taylor, is Director of Magnetic Resonance Image Center, University of Newcastle, Honorary Consultant Physician, Newcastle upon Tyne Hospital, NHS Foundation Trust, leader of the world's first diabetes remission trial, DIRECT, which showed that the good proportion of people with the diabetes can get rid of the diabetes, and that is remission. Dr. Taylor, I welcome you to the show, and I thank Dr. Anthony that he brought you on board with us.
Thank you, Arifa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Anthony, we had certain other programs where we did talk about diabetes and remission. And of course, you linked it with obesity and the fat deposited on the organs. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us to participate in these programs, and also Roy for joining us today, because I know that what you're going to tell the audience about is something which is really very exciting, which is that in the previous programs we've concentrated on obesity and the effects it has on various conditions, including diabetes. But your work, which goes back over 15 years or more, actually has drawn attention to the fact that we may be missing an awful lot of individuals who we can help simply because they're not as heavy as those who we might otherwise help to lose weight. So I think it would be useful to start right at the very beginning, because when you first published that work, you referred to your initial exciting observations that you made when you saw people who'd had bariatric surgery. And I should say that we've had a bariatric surgeon talking about surgery on the program, and he's also speaking again in a few weeks' time. You saw some dramatic changes, and I've seen those as well in our bariatric clinic. But also you have undertaken the studies looking at detailed ways in which the body responds to the changes after surgery and after weight loss. So there's a really exciting background to all of this, which most people are unaware of. So let's start at the beginning. You made those observations over 15 years ago in people who'd had bariatric surgery, and in those who had adhered very strongly to diet. Now, it's another thing you've mentioned in some of your writings, is that there's a very small percentage of people with, as you said, an iron will, who can actually stick to a diet and manage to lose the amount of weight that's needed. But not everybody can do that. Most people can't. So could you begin at the beginning, please? That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Well, the beginning of it is really what I've been doing for the last 45 years. And that is, as a doctor, listening to my patients and gradually understanding what a terrible condition diabetes was for the individual. But we still did not know really what caused diabetes and how it all worked. Now, that's remarkable because we know so much about science, but do we really know what happens to food after we eat it? Well, it goes into the stomach, it gets absorbed, and then there's a big blank. Now, from about the mid-1980s, I've been chasing what happens to food in the body to understand this. And by 2006, we had learnt that people who acquire too much fat inside their liver really don't do very well because the liver stops responding to the normal control. Now, one of the main jobs of the liver is to keep putting out sugar all the time. And that's controlled, usually, but if there's too much fat there, it escapes from control. Now, just at that time, a particular person came to see me in the clinic. This person was extremely angry about developing diabetes and wanted to know how this person could escape from diabetes. And putting my research into practice, I said, well, I know that we can control sugar first thing in the morning if you were to lose a lot of weight and get rid of this fat in the liver. Now, that is what happened. But what astonished me was that it wasn't only the sugar first thing in the morning, which is all coming from the liver, but this person was able to handle meals normally during the day. And so it was quite clear it wasn't just the liver, it had to be the pancreas as well. Now, the pancreas makes insulin, which is the master regulator of how the body works. And so I had this puzzle. What was going on in the liver and the pancreas that could work together and produce this disease? It had to be quite simple because diabetes is such a common disease, and common diseases have to have a simple cause. They cannot be complicated. And after quite a long time, I came up with an idea that it was a vicious cycle of fat slowly building up in the liver, knocking on to a vicious cycle of fat slowly building up in the pancreas. That's all very well, because of course, there I was, really sitting in my office, dreaming. But there was an idea, and the brilliant thing about science is that we can go out and test an idea. And using the new tools that I had developed in magnetic resonance, that's a bit like MRI scans, we were able to look inside the body and see what was happening. But to take the fat away from the liver and the pancreas, I knew that people would have to lose about 33 pounds in weight, quite a lot. That was just a rough calculation. So we set about trying to do that. But of course, that's where the listening bit comes in, because over those 45 years, I've heard from people how difficult it is to lose weight, the battles of doing this. So we needed a way which would produce a surefire answer. And I used a low-calorie diet that was just liquids. So it was a sachet of powder made up in water. That was a meal, and there were 3 of those every day, together with some non-starchy vegetables, because the body needs some vegetables to work on as well. And to my astonishment, first of all, the sugar levels went back to normal. The hypothesis, this idea, seemed to be right. But the second absolutely astonishing thing was that people reported that they liked losing weight. They liked the diet. And they lost, guess what, 33 pounds over 8 weeks in a very short time.
Oh.
So that first study, this is started in 2008 and came to a head in 2011, showed us type 2 diabetes is potentially reversible. There is a way of losing weight reasonably easily without enormous pain and without too much hunger. And we had an idea of how it all worked. So, Tony, that's where it started from.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Dr.
Dr. Anthony. My question over here is, ordinary people, not everybody goes for bariatric surgery, one thing. And once we talk about these liquid drinks, can you give a clue how people can get, or can they make it themselves, or they have to buy these?
Yes. The liquid drinks that we used were commercially produced, and there are a wide variety of these, all sorts of different brands. But the important thing about all of them is that it has to describe on the packet that they are nutritionally complete. And so there's Slim Fast, there is Optifast, there is Exante, a number of different products which can be found in the information that accompanies this program.
Okay.
But if people didn't want to go out and buy those, there is a simpler way, because simply by drinking 2 pints of whole milk every day and taking a multivitamin tablet, that is sufficient to look after the body and keep it healthy and achieve the weight loss. So we used the commercially available packets, which are widely available in all countries, and there is a simple alternative which can be used.
Yeah. We should add that all of those products are actually controlled by regulation.
It's not advertisement, but that's coming from the doctor is, so Slim Fast is available in the market. Optifast, doctor said it's also available in the market because it does have nutritional value and it can help to reduce weight, but you have to follow the instructions. Another thing is for the home, multivitamin tablets on a regular ground with the 2 pounds of milk every day. For how many days approximately? 15 days?
For 8 weeks. So we're talking about 56 days. Now, it's worthwhile pointing out that we're looking at an illness which is very severe. And sometimes doctors say, I wouldn't want to do that. But of course, they are not facing the terrible consequences, potentially, of losing their health, having all sorts of troubles in the body. And so, when faced with a really serious condition, if a person was asked if they wanted an operation to get rid of it, and they'd have to take 2 months off work, of course they would do that. They would have the operation. This is like an operation. You need to do it. You need to change your weight from one level to another level. And so it's the intense nature of this and the fact that it is only for 2 months that leads to its widespread success in general.
Thank you very kindly. Yes, Dr. Leeds.
Just one additional point. In the preliminary study that was done prior to the direct trial, which was the Glasgow-Newcastle joint exercise, a little trial done in the Highlands and Islands, where people were given the choice of using either the milk option or the commercial option. The actual published evidence shows that most of them actually chose the commercial option because it was easier. But it is also very important to say that the commercial ones are all regulated by national regulations in relation to composition, so 3 products will provide 100% of the daily requirement for all micronutrients. It's also important to say that not everybody is nutritionally sound. At the beginning, we know that, for example, vitamin D deficiency is quite prevalent among some groups within the UK, and that it is possible that using a formula diet may actually correct some aspects of nutritional status, and there is evidence, published evidence for that as well. So, there are different advantages in doing it in different ways. But one of the important things is that in your diet, you added in the vegetables up to 200 grams, I think, of non-starchy vegetables.
That's right. And in fact, it could have been rather more than that. But again, as a doctor, I know that constipation can be a big problem. And so this was a way of offsetting that and preventing it. And it worked really very well. But interestingly, my research participants came back to me and said, look, we can make it more interesting than just having lettuce and cucumber and tomato. We can take cabbage and add curry powder and make an interesting soup. We can add other spices. And so all sorts of ideas came in because it's perfectly possible to use spices and herbs to flavor anything that is eaten, and they contain almost nothing in the way of extra calories. So there is enormous potential for setting up a diet that suits individual tastes, but always keeping the total amount of food quite low, because it's just important to lose this weight and to lose it over a short period.
So, Dr. Anthony, I will bring you in. So, as we said that multivitamins, I just go for the home remedy, multivitamins with the 2 pounds of milk, so we can add vegetables with the flavors on it.
Yes, and if people need to find out more detail, there will be links at the end of the program and sources that they can look to with detailed information in them.
Thank you.
So we are going to provide that information. Can we go on to the question of the studies that you undertook in Newcastle, looking at what you actually found in the liver, the pattern of loss of liver fat, and then what happened in the pancreas and the recovery of function in the pancreas?
Yes, we were able to show, using our special MRI scans, that within 7 days of starting the diet, the amount of fat inside the liver, which was surprisingly high in very ordinary type 2 diabetes, that amount of fat fell back to the level that we saw in people of equivalent weight who didn't have diabetes. Now, that's a huge change, but what was even more astonishing was that the response of the liver to insulin, which was very inadequate at first, was completely normalized after 7 days. Now, it's worthwhile pausing there and saying completely normalized. Often you'll hear scientists say there was a significant effect, but the statistical significance is not important. Don't look at that. You need to know the effect size, and we're talking about going all the way back to normal. Now, this was an absolute revelation, because to be able to take one aspect of type 2 diabetes and make it normal had never been seen before. So that was the early response of the liver, and the liver fat continued to be very low for the rest of the time. But in the pancreas, very interestingly, it was different. The fall in fat was slower, and the insulin response came up just very gradually. It was almost there at 4 weeks, but by 8 weeks, it was almost fully restored. So we can see that the insulin-producing cells were actually waking up. And again, this caused astonishment around the world when that paper was published in 2011, because we were coupling our MRI measurements, looking inside the body, with the measurements that other people could make of actually what was happening with making insulin, what was happening with making glucose in the liver, and showing that things were going back to normal. So we had actually demonstrated for the first time what actually had gone wrong in type 2 diabetes and how it potentially could be set right. So that insight as to why have I got diabetes, doctor? Well, we can now explain to you exactly why it is that your sugar levels are too high.
And of course, in the actual large clinical trials that have been done, the individuals who participated had a diagnosis of diabetes, say, up to 6 years. But suppose somebody who's listening says, well, I've actually had diabetes for 15 years. Is this still going to be beneficial for me or not? How would you answer that?
Well, we have very clear information on that, in that the second study that we did looked at people of all durations of type 2 diabetes. And what we showed was that after about 11 years, it was quite unusual to be able to get people completely back to normal. Less than 4 years, yes, there was a very good chance. Up to 8 years, quite good, and then so-so about 10 years. So we can see that, yes, there is an effect of diabetes causing bad changes inside the pancreas that can't be reversed easily, but only after about 10 years of type 2 diabetes. So the longer the duration, the less likely it is that a person can get back from diabetes back to normal. But there's only one way of finding out whether you're that exceptional person who has had long duration diabetes and might be able to do it. You've got to suck it and see. So go ahead, lose the weight. And let me just tell you one thing that our research participants said. It came out time and time again. They came in and said, do you know what, doctor? I feel 10 years younger.
Wow.
If you lose 33 pounds in weight, you will be able to keep up with your children. You'll be able to chase your grandchildren around. It is a profound benefit of health. So don't hesitate before trying to see if you too can reverse your diabetes however long you've had it.
Yes, and of course we should add that there are a number of other conditions that are affected by being heavy or having too much fat. And as you know, I work in Copenhagen at the Arthritis Institute, and we've shown quite clearly that similar amounts of weight loss by the same method actually make dramatic changes in those people. In Stockholm and other places, they've done the same work with obstructive sleep apnea, which can be a big problem in diabetes, again with improvement. So it's very clear that this type of weight loss has an application for those with diabetes, but also beyond that in a whole range of different conditions. So what you've done actually is shown how useful it and important it is to do this. Of course, there is also a big problem in gastroenterology practice with high fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, isn't there? Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, indeed. Fatty liver disease, but that's a slightly mysterious thing. It's not commonly talked about. Many people wouldn't know whether they had fatty liver. They've never heard of it. But the important point about this fatty liver disease is that it leads to premature heart disease. Now, there's no mystery about why this is so, because it's the liver that produces fats for the rest of the body, and with fatty liver disease, it's simply producing too much fat. And if we now just take a single piece of information from the big direct study that you've mentioned, where I worked together with Professor Mike Lean in Glasgow, with my team in Newcastle, and we set up a large study to run in primary care to see what really happened in real life. Well, we followed people up for 2 years. Now, in the control group who had just ordinary management, best possible management according to current guidelines, there were 5 people who developed severe vascular problems, things like heart attacks, strokes, etc. There were another 5 people who developed various cancers. Now, this is unremarkable sort of numbers because we were studying about 150 people in each group. But you know, in the group that lost the weight, we had just one relatively less important vascular event, and we had no cancers. All of the cancers that had developed in the other group were weight-related cancers. And so here we've got something of enormous importance. We've known for a long time that people with type 2 diabetes are more prone to cancers. It's almost certainly driven on by the very high insulin levels because, unfortunately, cancers like very high insulin levels. And when people lose weight, those levels drop to normal in the background. Certainly, we can get a nice increase after meals, but it's the background levels that are important here. And so there are huge health benefits that are far outside just the sugar.
Yes.
The heart disease risk goes down and the cancer risk goes down.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Taylor, my question, and Dr. Leeds, my question is, we live with our ideas and what we learn from our elders. And since you have started talking about this subject, remission of diabetes, most of us have learned, and it's in our mind that diabetes, once a person has diabetes, has to live with the condition throughout his life. And then islets of Langerhans, because those are dead cells and it doesn't work. It's a great research that diabetes remission is possible, but I have seen many slim people having diabetes type 2 what do you advise for them? Do they have fatty liver and fatty pancreas?
Very good question. Just a comment before I answer that, if I may. You mentioned the insulin-producing cells potentially being dead in the pancreas. Excitingly, we now know that they're not dead. They're just hibernating, and taking the fat away allows them to wake up again. So this old idea that the insulin-producing cells, these beta cells, were dead is not true. Let me turn to the matter of people who look slim. Now, if we go back to 2004, just when these ideas were coming together in my head, and this one person came to see me who was so cross about their own diabetes, that person had a body mass index of 24. In other words, they were entirely ordinary. I still told that person to lose weight, because at the age of 21, that person had been very slim. The body mass index had been about 19.5, perfectly normal. That's just how this person was built. And so I knew right from the very first person on whom I advised this that it's possible for slim people to lose weight and get rid of the diabetes. Now, at this very moment, I'm running a study on type 2 diabetes in people of normal BMI. And I don't want to go into our preliminary results, but they're very encouraging. But I'll just mention one fact. That is, these people with a normal body mass index who regard themselves as being slim have got a surprisingly high total amount of fat in the body. Now, that's important, because if you go into a gym or even some doctor's surgeries, you can get hold of a machine which will tell you what percentage fat is in your body. Now, for a man, it should be between 9 and 20% roughly. For a woman, 20 to 30% roughly. But these people had a fat percentage which was surprisingly high for their build. So they looked slim, but in fact, they had hidden fat inside. And we can now turn this round from all my research and say, if a person has true type 2 diabetes, they have become too heavy for their own body. Not a population average. Nobody should be looking at population averages to compare themselves. We're all individuals, and that is where the personal fat threshold concept comes from. A person with diabetes has gathered more fat than they personally can cope with. Some people can cope with a lot. And in fact, 3/4 of very heavy people do not have type 2 diabetes. They have a high threshold. This is the luck of the draw with your genes. So, coming back to the simple question you answered, yes, slim people with type 2 diabetes should lose weight to see if they too can reverse their diabetes to normal.
So this means if somebody has an ideal BMI or according to age and height has ideal weight, even that person, if they lose their weight, they can reverse their diabetes.
That's correct, but I would point out there's a problem with this concept of ideal body weight, because that's a population average. And some people are on the one end of the spectrum and look and weigh very little. Other people are very heavy people. They're heavily built. They play rugby or play American football. They're big people. And so the concept of ideal body weight is just a bit curious. But if someone has type 2 diabetes, they've become too heavy for themselves, no one else.
We should add that at the end of
we will wrap up the
program,
program, Dr. Anthony.
yeah, we've put some information and some web links to the diabetes risk assessment websites, which is something that is available to anybody. But also, I just draw your attention to this publication, Life Without Diabetes, which Roy has written. Again, I've given the details at the end of the program, and this describes what we've discussed just now, but also has an enormous number of very useful, practical information and very good recipes at the end, which I suspect from the way that they're presented may well have come from some of your patients, actually, some of them, or some of your research assistants, I imagine. I'm
Correct.
Yes.
Our research volunteers
Yes.
came forward with these interesting ideas and recipes,
Yes.
and my research dietitian, Alison Barnes,
Yes.
collected these together, and Alison put together
Yep.
the recipes that are at the end of that book. So I'm no cook. I don't write recipes, but we can listen. And our volunteers came up with really interesting ways of eating.
Thank you very
Thank you.
kindly, and I think we should make today's title with this Life Without Diabetes by Dr. Taylor. You can find some recipes in it, and you can find the clues. If you lose your weight, your life will be much easier, better. You can get rid of many other sicknesses linked to obesity and diabetes. I thank you, both of doctors. Thank you very much. And honest to God, I mean it. We are blessed to have such great researchers with us. And I hope and I wish we can learn something out of it. I thank you very much once again. God bless.
A pleasure.
Stay safe, stay blessed. And I hope so. This program will be of great use for you. You must forward it to your loved ones. It can help them to live happy, healthy, and terrific life. Thanks, and have a wonderful day today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.